One thing I noticed earlier in chapter 2, when Moon goes to Mr. Abrascado's store to get his goods and such, that Pap trades his furs and vegetables and stuff for, is that he was fascinated by the stoplight. Like, he wanted to stop and look at the blinking stoplight just to see any cars pass by, because that was interesting to Moon, which tells me he hasn't been around people very long, if that's the most interesting part of his day. He's also fascinated by the workers that are building the lodge. And he went to Mr. Abrascado's store, got what they could. They go back, and Moon was hoping that they could get some like candy or some canned peas. That sound exciting to you guys?
Then,
some canned peas, yeah.
And Mr. Abrascado
It's not what I want for.
Told Moon's dad before he died, all they're building the hunting lodge and all they're gonna hunt is squirrel.
Yeah, he said a lodge that big and
all they're gonna hunt is squirrel.
all that big lodge for not a whole lot of action, I guess. So that leaves us with chapter 3. When we left off on chapter 3, Moon definitely sounds like he looks up to his dad, because his dad said, you know, he wanted the peas in the can. He's like, well, we got a pile of toasted acorns you haven't touched yet. I figured he wasn't in the mood to buy extras. We got everything we need already, don't we, Pap? Pap nodded. Got everything we need, he repeated. And so that's about where they left it. So, chapter 3. Winter had been on us for about 2 months, and the forest creatures were fat and fluffy in their new coats. It had started to snow once, but the ground didn't hold it, which always disappointed me. I only remembered a few times when there was enough snow to make tracks in it. One of those times, Pap and I made pine bark sleds and had races down the riverbank. I always wanted to do it again. Just pointing this out, why doesn't snow stick to the ground in Alabama?
Because it's wet.
Well, it's wet, and what's the temperature like in Alabama?
Alabama, it's hot.
It's normally pretty warm, right? It's cool climate in the wintertime, but not cold enough for that snow to stick. Usually, it doesn't last very long down here in the south.
Is that the hottest state?
No,
Texas is.
the desert is the hottest state.
Arizona, Texas, but Alabama is further south you get, the closer you're getting to the equator, the warmer it is. Allow me to keep going, please.
The Sonora Desert.
On the morning Pat broke his leg, the north wind was tossing the tops of the trees and gray clouds raced over our heads. Pat was always alert when the wind stirred the forest floor and cartwheeled the leaves. It was hard to tell which sounds were natural and which weren't. We were checking traps along the beaver dam only a mile from the lodge. With the wind blowing like it was and us being so close to Mr. Wellington's place, Pat must have been extra nervous. I think he was too busy looking around for signs of people to pay attention where he was going. He slipped on the dam and got his shin caught between 2 branches. He just had enough time to turn and look at me before he fell into the beaver pond on his back. The water was so clear I saw his face staring up at me and wincing in pain. I jumped down after him and jerked the branches until his leg came loose. The rest of Pap splashed into the water, and then he dragged himself out of the pond after he was propped up against the cypress knee. I went and found some sticks to use for a splint. We bound his leg with the leather shoelaces from my moccasins. That afternoon, I got Pat back to the shelter in the wheelbarrow. He pulled himself inside, and I saw how much his leg hurt by the sweat that soaked his face and his clothes. I helped him up on the hide pile and stayed next to him and gave him water as he needed it. Pat didn't like doctors. He didn't like medicine that you couldn't find in the forest, so there wasn't much else for me to do. Sometime that night, Pap told me to take his boot off. I watched his hands go white knuckle the roots above his head while I pulled slowly on the heel. He didn't make any noise because it was nighttime. When I got the boot off, bloody water and sand poured out of it. I cut the sock away with my knife and I placed it to the side. We saved everything. Even a bloody sock could make a rag to patch clothes. In the dim light of the grease lamp, I saw parts of Pap's bone coming through his shin. Seeing bone and blood and wounds was nothing to me. I dealt with them almost every day, killing, skinning, and butchering animals. I only hesitated so that Pap could tell me what to do. Get a rag. Wipe it off, he said. Boil some water, put that rag in the water before you do. So the wound won't get infected, Pap? That's right. I went to the wood stove and I did as he said. When I returned and began to gently wipe his leg, I watched his face. I saw his expression change when the rag went over the jagged portion of his bone. Does it hurt? Just keep wiping. You want me to go get Mr. Abrascado? Nothing he can't do. You can't do yourself, boy. I nodded and kept wiping. I stayed up with him that night after the wound was cleaned. After a while, Pap didn't seem to be concerned that we stay quiet anymore. He lay there and talked to me and told me most of what he was thinking. "You tell me again why we live out here?" he asked me. "Because we never asked for anything and nobody ever gave us anything. Because of that, we don't owe anything to anybody." "Who is it that thinks we owe them something?" "The government." "That's right." After a moment, "And what's going to happen to everybody that relies on the government?" "Well, when the war comes, they're not going to be able to take care of themselves," I said. "They've forgotten how to grow food and trap game, how to make their own clothes and shelter, how to find their own medicine in the forest," he said. "That's right." "How to shoot rifles." "That's right," Pap said. "All those things." "And I know how to do it all, Pap." He nodded. I walked over to the stove and put some more wood into it. Even when Pap let us burn it all night, the heat was rarely enough to keep our breaths from streaming right in front of our faces. I returned to the hide pile. "I'm not going to get better," he said. "What?" "I'm not going to get better." "Are you going to die?" He nodded. I felt my stomach twist. "Tonight?" "No, but soon. Something like this leg won't heal." "How soon?" "I don't know." "But I don't understand." "Think about it. Think about a deer that breaks its leg. What happens?" "But you're not a deer," I yelled. "There's no difference. We're all animals." I felt like I'd get sick on the floor. "What will I do?" "That's what I'm going to tell you." Pap said that it might not be long before Mr. Wellington ran me off the property. I'd have to find someone else to live with. Pap said there were many other people like us all over the country. He said there's more now than ever. Most of them were out west: Montana, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming. Alaska was even better. A man could still homestead in Alaska. He could still get to places where no one would find him. People could still make a living off trapping up there. Hides are worth something up in Alaska. I'd have to find my way there. But how? You'll figure it out. You can't rely on me anymore, Moon. You just remember the things I taught you. Take cover during the day, move at night. Use the stars. Don't trust anybody. Write me smoke letters if you get lonely. You talk to Mama with those smoke letters? Sometimes I do, he said. She say anything back? She does. Not in the way you'd think. How will I get the answers from the smoke, Pap? Pap didn't say anything for a few seconds. Hey, you just do what I tell you, he finally said. For the first couple of days, I tried to keep our regular routine each morning while Pap was sick. I rose before daylight and checked the traps. I brought back what I caught. I skinned it, butchered it, prepped the hide. I held the water from the creek, cut the needles for the tea. In the late afternoon, I did my reading lessons. But it was hard to keep my mind on those things with Pap lying in the shelter getting worse. Suddenly, it seemed like there wasn't any reason for doing anything. Mr. Abbracado hadn't bought our hides in years. We had plenty of water stored up already. And if Pap was going to die soon, why did we need more? And how would I find a place like Alaska on my own? I couldn't clean Pap's wound without him twisting about in pain. Finally, he told me to stop worrying over it and leave it alone. That won't do it any good, he said. It's too far gone to trouble over. It's not too much trouble, Pap. I don't mind. Leave it be. Put that rag away. What if we cut it off? Too late. Infection's gone up my whole leg. I started crying. I can't live by myself, Pap. He shook his head. Shut up, boy. You don't cry. You hear me? I wiped my eyes and I nodded on the floor. I nodded at the floor. I put my arms around his neck. I can't do it, Pap. I can't make it to Alaska. I can't fight the government. I like it here. I don't see why I can't get Mr. Abbracado to come help you. He'll just get the law down on you. I can run from the law. I can get away, Pap. Pap didn't answer me. He's quiet for a long time. He'll be all right, he finally said. I don't want to hear any more about it. Y'all, you just let your dad die like that with a broken leg?
No.
Can you hear Moon like pleading with his dad? Like, come on, please.
I would have listened.
Let me get Mr. Abbracado. You wouldn't have listened to Pap? You would have just gone and got help?
I would have gone again.
Yeah? Chris, what did you want to say?
I saw Davion had his laptop on.
Pardon?
I saw Davion had his laptop on.
Okay, that's not helpful for right now. Chapter 4. Actually, I'm going to do this.